They took her as a prisoner, until she spoke the sacred words only a true Apache would know. The desert sun beat mercilessly against Maria's fair skin as she stumbled through the sagebrush, her torn calico dress catching on thorns with each desperate step. Behind her, the smoke from the burning wagon train still darkened the Arizona sky, a black scar against the endless blue. Her husband's blood had dried on her hands hours ago, but she could still smell the metallic scent mixed with gunpowder and fear. The Apache warriors had appeared like shadows materializing from the red rocks, their painted faces fierce under the blazing sun. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of generations spent in this harsh landscape, their horses' hooves silent on the hardpan earth. Maria had watched in horror as they overwhelmed the small wagon train, their war cries echoing off the canyon walls. Now, as her legs gave out beneath her, she collapsed beside a cluster of prickly pear cactus. The thorns bit into her palms as she tried to push herself up, but exhaustion had finally claimed her. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race, though she no longer had the strength to run. 3 Apache men dismounted near her, their faces unreadable. The leader, a man with graying hair and intricate turquoise jewelry, studied her with dark eyes that seemed to see through to her soul. He spoke in rapid Apache to his companions, gesturing toward her with hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime, handling weapons and horses. "Please," Maria whispered, her voice cracked from thirst and terror. "I have nothing left to take." The leader tilted his head, surprised perhaps by the resignation in her voice rather than hysterical pleading. He barked an order, and the younger warriors bound her hands with rawhide, though not roughly. As they lifted her onto a horse, Maria caught fragments of their conversation, words that stirred something deep in her memory, syllables that felt familiar on her tongue despite the years. The journey to their camp took hours, winding through hidden trails that seemed to appear and disappear in the landscape. Maria found herself studying the men who had captured her, noting the way they read the land like a book, how they communicated with subtle gestures and glances. There was an order to their movements, a respect for the desert that surrounded them. As evening approached, they crested a ridge, and below them lay a hidden valley, where smoke from cooking fires drifted between traditional wickiups and a few canvas tents. Children's laughter carried on the wind, and Maria saw women tending to daily tasks, their movements graceful and purposeful. This wasn't the savage camp she had imagined from the stories told around frontier fires. The leader, whom the others called Nyakai, helped her down from the horse. His touch was firm but not cruel, and when their eyes met, she saw something unexpected. A flicker of curiosity, perhaps even recognition. The camp fell silent as they approached, faces turning to study the white woman who had survived the La Diritak. An elderly woman emerged from the largest wickiup, her silver hair braided with feathers and her weathered face bearing the wisdom of many seasons. She spoke sharply to Nyakai, gesturing toward Maria with obvious displeasure. The argument that followed was heated, conducted in rapid Apache that Maria strained to understand. As they debated her fate, Maria felt the weight of eyes upon her, some hostile, others merely curious. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, having never seen a white woman up close. The setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and red, and despite her circumstances, Maria found herself struck by the beauty of this hidden world. Finally, Nyakai raised his hand for silence. He approached Maria, his expression serious, and spoke a single word in Apache, a word that would determine whether she lived or died. The word Nyakai spoke hung in the desert air like a challenge. Shizye. Father. But it was more than it was a test, a key that would unlock either her salvation or her doom. Maria felt her breath catch as memories long buried began to surface, fragments of a childhood she had tried to forget. The elderly woman, whom the others called Itza, stepped closer, her dark eyes boring into Maria's soul. She spoke in Apache, her voice carrying the authority of one who had seen many seasons. "Hashte ishti?" she demanded. "Do you understand?" Maria's throat felt like desert sand. Around them, the camp had grown silent except for the crackle of fires and the distant sound of horses shifting in the corral. Every face was turned toward her, waiting. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the delicate balance between life and death hanging on her next words. "Oh," she whispered, the word emerging from depths she hadn't accessed in 15 years. "Yes." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd, but Itza raised her hand for silence. She continued in Apache, her words measured and deliberate. "If you understand, then tell me, what does the coyote teach us when he sings to the moon?" Maria closed her eyes, reaching back through years of trying to be someone else, back to when she was not Maria Hendricks from Pennsylvania, but Lila, the strange child who had lived between two worlds. Her adoptive white parents had beaten the Sioux. Apache words from her tongue had dressed her in calico and taught her to read English and embroider flowers on cloth, but they could not beat the memories from her heart. "The coyote teaches us that we are never alone," she answered in Apache, her pronunciation rusty but true. "Even in the darkest night, even when we cannot see our people, we are connected by the songs that bind us to this land." Itza's expression shifted slightly, though whether in approval or deeper suspicion Maria could not tell. "And what does the eagle show us when he circles high above the mountains? That we must see with more than our eyes," Maria replied, her confidence growing as the language flowed back to her. "We must see with the wisdom of our ancestors, with the knowledge that comes from understanding our place in the great circle of all things." An old man emerged from the crowd, his face scarred by battle and weather. He hobbled forward on a walking stick carved with intricate symbols. "Child," he said in Apache, "who taught you these words? What white woman knows the sacred teachings?" Maria looked at him, then at the faces surrounding her. She could lie, could make up a story about learning from Apache prisoners or friendly tribes, but something in the old man's eyes told her that lies would not serve her here. These people, her people, for she remembered now that they were her people, valued truth above all else. "My grandmother," she said quietly. "Before the soldiers came to our village, before they took the children to the school, before I became someone else," she paused, letting the words settle in the cooling air. "My grandmother was called Nalnish. She taught me that words have power, that the sacred songs live in our blood even when our minds forget." The old man's eyes widened. He turned to Itza and spoke rapidly, his voice filled with excitement and disbelief. Maria caught fragments, something about the village by the great rocks, about the raid 20 seasons past, about children who disappeared into the white world and were never seen again. "Nalnish," Itza repeated slowly, rolling the name around her tongue like a prayer. "Nalnish was my sister." The revelation hit Maria like a physical blow. This woman, this stern elder who held her fate in weathered hands, was family. Blood. Of her blood. The recognition was mutual. She could see it in Itza's suddenly softened features, in the way the old woman stepped closer, studying Maria's face in the firelight. "You have her eyes," Itza whispered in Apache. "The eyes that see what others cannot see." But even as the family connection was acknowledged, Maria could sense the tension in the camp. Being related to Itza might save her life, but it would not erase the fact that she had lived among the whites, that she had married one of them, that she carried their scent and their ways. Nayakai stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the emotional reunion. "Blood calls to blood," he said formally. "But the question remains, are you Apache or are you white? The woman who stands before us wears the clothes of our enemies, speaks their language, follows their god. Can sacred words spoken by a white tongue carry the power of our ancestors?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the dying fires. Maria realized that knowing the words was only the beginning. Now she would have to prove that she was truly one of them, that the years among the whites had not killed the Apache spirit that lived in her blood. Dawn broke over the hidden valley with fingers of gold and rose, painting the rocky walls in soft light. Maria had spent the night in Itza's wickiup, surrounded by the familiar sounds of her childhood, the whisper of wind through hide walls, the soft breathing of sleeping children, the distant call of a night bird. Yet sleep had eluded her as memories continued to surface like water from a deep well. She remembered now the day the soldiers came, their blue uniforms stark against the red earth. She remembered her mother's tears, her grandmother's final words, whispered urgently in her ear as strange hands pulled her away. "Remember who you are, little one. The white man can take your body, but only you can give him your spirit." Itza stirred beside her, the old woman's eyes immediately alert in the way of those who had lived through danger. "You spoke in your sleep," she said quietly in Apache. "You called for your mother." "I dream of her sometimes," Maria admitted. "Even after all these years, even after I tried to forget." "The heart remembers what the mind tries to lose," Itza replied, sitting up slowly. "Tell me of these white people. Who raised you? Tell me how they changed you." Maria spoke of the boarding school, of the matrons who scrubbed her skin raw trying to wash away her heritage, of the teachers who beat her for speaking Apache. She told of the kind white family who adopted her, who gave her a new name and a new life, who genuinely believed they were saving her soul by teaching her to reject everything she had been born to. "They were not cruel," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "They believed they were helping me, but they wanted me to become someone I was not." Itza listened without judgment, occasionally nodding. When Maria finished, the old woman was quiet for a long moment. "And the man you married? Did you love him?" The question caught Maria off guard. In all the horror of the previous day, she had barely processed her grief. "Yes," she whispered. "He was good to me. He never knew about this." She gestured around the wiki-up. "I never told him." "Why?" Maria struggled to find words for the shame she had carried for so long. "I was afraid he would see me differently. I was afraid I would lose the life I had built. And now I have lost everything anyway." Outside, the camp was stirring to life. Maria could hear women preparing the morning meal, children's voices raised in play, men discussing the day's plans, normal sounds of a normal morning, except that her presence had disrupted the normalcy of this place. Nayakai appeared at the entrance of the wiki-up, his expression serious. "The council has decided," he announced. "You will be tested. If you pass, you may stay as one of us. If you fail..." He left the consequence unspoken. Itza rose stiffly to her feet. "What kind of test?" "She must prove she can survive as Apache. She must show that the white world has not made her weak, that she can contribute to our people's strength." Nayakai looked directly at Maria. "You will go with the women to gather medicine plants. You will help prepare food in the traditional way. You will care for the children and learn our current customs. If after 7 days you have shown yourself worthy, the council will accept you." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. 7 days to prove she belonged to a people she had been taught to forget, to demonstrate skills she had never been allowed to develop. "And if I fail the test, then you will be given a horse and supplies and sent away from here. You will never be welcome in any Apache camp again." The sentence was more merciful than she had expected, but in some ways crueler than death. To be cast out completely, to belong nowhere and to no one. It was a fate that terrified her more than the grave. "I accept," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The day began immediately. Women whose names she struggled to remember led her to hidden springs where sacred plants grew. They watched as she tried to identify healing herbs, their faces impassive when she confused one plant for another. Her hands, soft from years of indoor work, blistered as she helped gather firewood and prepare hides. The children were the harshest, judges of all. They followed her with curious eyes, whispering among themselves, testing whether she could understand their rapid Apache chatter. When she stumbled over a word or failed to grasp a cultural reference, they giggled behind their but slowly as the day wore on, muscle memory began to assert itself. Her hands remembered the motion of grinding corn, even if they lacked the strength and rhythm of the other women. Her ears began to separate the sounds of Apache into familiar patterns. Most importantly, her spirit began to remember the connection to the land, the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. As evening approached and the cooking fires were lit, Maria found herself working beside a young mother named Dahia, helping to prepare a stew of meat and wild vegetables. The woman had been watching her all day with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Your hands are learning," Dahia said quietly in Apache. "But your heart, that is still divided." Maria looked up from the pot she was stirring. "What do you mean?" "You mourn the white man you married. You long for the soft bed and easy life. Part of you wishes you had never been found." Dahia's voice was not unkind, merely observant. "Until you stop looking backward, you cannot truly walk forward." The words stung because they held truth. Maria realized that even as she tried to reclaim her Apache identity, part of her was still clinging to the life she had lost. She was trying to be two people at once, and in doing so, she was failing to be either. That night, as she lay in Itsa's wickiup listening to the sounds of the desert, Maria made a decision. Tomorrow, she would stop trying to be the white woman she had been, trained to become. Tomorrow, she would start the harder work of discovering who she truly was. The seventh day dawned clear and still, the kind of morning that made the desert seem to hold its breath. Maria woke before sunrise, her body now accustomed to the rhythms of Apache life. Her hands had grown stronger, her skin darker from the sun, and her dreams had begun to come in Apache rather than English. She had spent the week learning more than just survival skills. Under Itsa's patient guidance, she had relearned the prayers her grandmother had taught her, the proper way to address the spirits of the land, the stories that connected her people to this harsh but beautiful country. Each day had stripped away another layer of the white identity she had worn like ill-fitting clothes, revealing something more authentic beneath. But the real test would come today, when the council gathered to make their final judgment. As the sun climbed higher, Maria joined the other women in their daily tasks, no longer the awkward outsider she had been a week ago. Dahia worked beside her, no longer suspicious, but not yet fully accepting. The children still watched her, but now their curiosity held less wariness and more genuine interest. "You move differently now," observed Ki, an elder woman who specialized in weaving baskets. "Less like you are fighting the ground beneath your feet." It was true. Maria could feel the change in herself, not just in her skills, but in something fundamental. The constant tension she had carried for years, the sense of always pretending to be someone else, had begun to ease. She was still discovering who she truly was, but she no longer felt like she was living a lie. When the sun reached its zenith, Nayakai appeared with several other men from the council. Their faces were grave, revealing nothing of their intentions. "It is time," he announced simply. The entire camp gathered in a circle, the arrangement as formal as any courtroom. Maria stood in the center, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. Itsa took her place among the elders, her expression carefully neutral despite their family connection. Nayakai spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 7 days ago, we brought a white woman to our camp. She claimed to be Apache, to carry our blood and know our ways. We have watched her, tested her, questioned her heart. Now we must decide. Is she one of us? Or does she remain forever a stranger? One by one, the council members spoke. Some praised her efforts to learn, her respectful attitude, her willingness to work hard despite her soft hands and unfamiliarity with their ways. Others questioned whether 7 days could truly erase 15 years of white influence, whether someone who had denied her heritage for so long could ever truly reclaim it. The debate continued as the afternoon sun grew hot overhead. Maria listened to her fate being discussed as if she were not present, understanding now that this was not just about her individual worth, but about larger questions that troubled the Apache people. How to maintain their identity in a world that sought to destroy it, whether those who had been taken could ever truly return. Finally, Itsa rose to speak. The camp fell silent, recognizing her authority as both an elder and Maria's newly discovered aunt. "I have listened to your words," she began, her voice strong despite her age. "You speak of tests and proofs, of blood and loyalty. But I tell you this, the sacred words she spoke on that first night, the words that saved her life, those cannot be learned from books or stolen from other people's. They live in the heart, or they live nowhere at all." She paused, looking directly at Maria. "This woman was taken from us as a child. She did not choose to leave, and for 15 years she survived in a world that tried to kill the Apache spirit within her. That she kept even a fragment of our ways alive in her heart. That she could call upon the teachings of our ancestors when death threatened. That is not weakness. That is the greatest strength." The old woman's words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "I say she has always been Apache. The white world tried to claim her, but they failed. They dressed her in their clothes, taught her their language, gave her their god, but they could not touch the part of her that belongs to this land, to our people, to the blood that runs in her veins." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Maria felt tears she had not allowed herself to shed for days finally begin to fall. Nyakai stood, his decision clear in his bearing. "The council has heard all arguments. We have watched and tested and questioned. Our decision is this: she who was called Lila as a child, who was stolen and renamed Maria, will now choose her own name as a woman of the Apache people. She is welcome in our camps, welcome at our fires, welcome as our sister." The formal words broke the tension that had held the camp in its grip. Children whooped with excitement, women began to smile, and men nodded their approval. But Maria felt the weight of the moment, understanding that this was not just acceptance but responsibility. "I choose to be called Nalnish," she said clearly, using her grandmother's name. Not to replace her memory, but to honor it, to carry forward what she began. Itza's eyes shone with tears of pride. "It is a good name. She would be proud to know her teaching saved your life and brought you home." As the celebration began around her, Maria, now Nalnish, realized that coming home had not meant returning to the place she had left as a child. It had meant discovering who she had always been meant to become. The white world had not destroyed her Apache spirit. It had only taught her how precious that spirit truly was. The desert wind picked up as evening approached, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain. Nalnish breathed deeply, finally able to fill her lungs. Without reservation, she had found her way back to her people, but more importantly, she had found her way back to herself. The sacred words had indeed saved her life, not because they proved her identity to others, but because they reminded her of the truth she had always carried within her heart. She was Apache, she always had been, and now finally she was home.